in at this point because Matthew's been talking nonstop and he's also got a panel coming up. So I'm going to let him have a break. I know that he does reply to all his tweets. He does reply to all of his emails and stuff. So if you've got questions, that's not a throwaway slide at the end. He puts way too much effort into giving love back to the email community. Like many of the other panels that we have, panel members that we have coming up, I can see Lauren Myers sitting backstage. Can't wait to hear from her. We've got Zakir and just waiting for Udemy to join us. And it's going to be, a great panel. Any panel with Lauren is always fantastic. So I'm glad that she agreed to join us at the very, very last minute. For other reasons, I wasn't able to confirm any earlier, but I really wanted to have her, so I'm glad that she's been able to join us. Zakir, I heard speak for the first time a couple of weeks ago. He was on a panel with Tanishq, I believe, and a few other people. His experience of coming from the murkier side and coming out the other end and what he learned and his experience there is from personal experience, I know that that's gold. And I always want to support people that have taken that journey and gone down the right path. So without too much ado, I'm going to bring in these amazing speakers. We have Udemy. Udemy is with us backstage now as well, postmaster at LinkedIn. I can see you waving, nobody else can, but we're going to bring you all on stage. So we're doing it a little bit differently because Matthew's just had like a marathon session of his own, and there's no break in between. So I filling in a little bit of time so I can get a breath. And you guys, when I bring you on, you're basically straight up live on LinkedIn, on Hopin. There's about 80 people at the moment. I'm on Hopin, and as soon as you go on camera, you're live. Just to let you know. Again, I'll let Matthew take over in a second. I'll just add everyone in, make sure that we can all hear each other. Zakir?
Hey, hi, Andrew. How are you?
Hey, cool. I'm good. I'm really glad that you were able to make it. I know it's
hi, Matthew.
Lauren?
Hello.
Matt, you've already done a summit or a webinar today, and you're doing another one. Thank you so much. Udemy, all the pleasure. We wanted to have you at Inbox Expo.
Hey guys.
Some company or someone gave you a job or something, so you're a bit busy. We're glad that you're able to make it now. Oh, that's them, LinkedIn. There we go. All right, I'm going to duck out, and Matt's going to take over. Thank you so much, guys.
Hello.
Hi, hey guys. Hey Lauren.
Hey Lauren. Hi Jimmy. Long time no see. How are you guys doing?
Great. So there's some leftover questions from my previous session. I think that would be great to have some people weigh in on beyond just myself. Give myself a minute from talking as well. So the first question was, are there ISPs still checking SPF on the display from? So this would be the old sender ID style setup for mail. Are people doing this? Do we still see it? And if so, what should people be concerned with regarding that? Maybe we'll start with Zakir if he has an answer for that.
Hello. Hey. Sorry, Matthew. Can you please repeat the question, please?
Yeah. So the question is, are there ISPs checking SPF on the display from versus the sender from, or the envelope from? And if so, what people should do or care about that?
Oh, okay. So you asking basically whether the MSPs are checking with respect to the envelope from address, right?
Well, so there's the question is, are they checking SPF against the display from versus the envelope from?
No. So the MSPs are basically checking the SPF for the from address that we are having, right? So that they can identify with the authenticity and the genuinity of the from the sender, basically. So that's what I can say. I mean, I don't know about anything else whether ISPs are checking, but I know for sure this is the thing that is going on as a norm.
Okay. Lauren, did you have
I
a
guess
thought on
I'll
that?
kind of jump in on this one, and I think it's one of those, like, if we just remember the fact that there are just so many different destinations out there, and all of them kind of play by their own rules. I think, you know, probably a lot of the bigger mailbox providers that most senders are sending to on like the B2C side probably have moved on to kind of like the, you know, the more current standards. But I think that's where, like, you know, especially if you're sending to destinations that are kind of in the corporate world or somewhere where there may be like a local IT admin who's kind of running that. It's possible that they are still checking on that version. So I would say probably maybe look into your statistics to see if there's certain domains or destinations where you're seeing like all of the mail fail, or you're seeing, you know, authentication failures, or something that's mentioned within the bounce messages that mentions authentication, and see if that's kind of what's going on there.
Jacob actually mentioned in the comments that Sesnum in the Czech Republic is checking SPF on the friendly from. So it is happening. It's certainly not common, but it is out there. It is happening. So I would say watch your bounces, like Lauren said, and certainly pay attention to the error codes or responses that you're seeing from the mailbox providers out there. Udeme, did you have anything you wanted to add to that, or do you think?
I think that could also bounce around. The energy you want to try to place on figuring out who's still checking what. So probably use that energy and make sure that you're authenticating mail streams properly. So to, like Jacob said in chat, a check ISP still checks for that, which, what if he didn't, and it's tricky to just keep track of all that, so it's easier just to focus on putting more emphasis to make sure that you authenticate properly. And then, because if you think about it from a production push, these ISPs have probably limited staff or X number of staff. It takes time to do code changes and move away from stuff. And so, yeah, I'm sure there's no laundry list of all the ISPs that do ABC. So, yeah.
Yeah, Jacob actually mentioned there's a few others as well. It seems to be more prevalent in the EU than it is in North America, at least. From the point of view of SPF, so I did talk about this in my session with SPF, when you go over the 10 lookups.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know, I have opinions on this, but I'd love to get your thoughts on it, around what are the dangers of, or what is the expected results for brands that go over the 10 lookups with SPF?
Well, who do you want to go first? Sorry to say that.
You started talking, so it's all you.
So I think one problem around that is that an X% of mail that a sender may think is getting could have authentication failure issues because of that extended 10+ DNS lookup for SPF. So every now and then, and I think this is the part where testing comes into play, monitoring comes into play, or just an occasional spot check. Because one thing that one team may do, you may not know what the DNS guys are doing or the network team guys are doing, depending on how large or small the company is. So LinkedIn, for example, it's so huge that it's luckily we keep track of things whereby if someone did one thing, we can say, oh, that team did that, and you just reach out and check, or double check with X team just to make sure. So, but also there's really no reason why there should be so many lookups, because it could break stuff, could break anything.
Yeah, and I guess I would challenge, I mean, I know some companies have a lot of different ESPs or different mailing platforms that they're sending from. So it is possible that you have that many lookups that are actually required within your SPF, I guess. But I think that's where, like, you know, really do an audit, make sure that all of the records or all of the bits and pieces that are included in that record are valid and that you're actually still sending from those IPs. But I think also maybe take advantage of subdomains, right? Because you could still have your top level domain, you know, kickbox.com, and we could have, you know, our transactional mail that's being sent from, I don't know, receipts at kickbox.com, marketing.kickbox.com, things like that really just kind of help separate that and give you the ability to kind of add more to your SPF that's more relevant to the actual mail stream that you're sending. Because it's probably very unlikely that you have one domain that's really, unless you're maybe change.org or some kind of huge organization like that, that you can't kind of separate it out and really fix that 10 hops issue.
Zakir, do you have any thoughts on that from StopSpoof?
Yeah, sure. So based on experience, like I can tell you a couple of points. One is like I have noticed one particular pattern with respect to the BFSI company, the BFSI vertical. So if the mail is actually coming from BFSI, a very big bank or any insurance group, so the ISPs tend to be a bit moderate and tend to be normal, and they normally give deliverability very good, and inboxing happens. But again, with the same thing, if there is a more than 10 recursive lookups happening. So if it's a small brand or someone who's having a very SMB or very small company, so they get penalized, they get punished. So that's what I've observed. But with respect to big brands and all, it doesn't matter that much. But again, best practices and hygiene definitely has to be put in place.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think, you guys all covered the different pieces of things that I would have asked or recommended, from subdomains to validating that the records are still legit or still necessary. And I think the experience that I've seen varies. So someone like Gmail may not care that you have 13 lookups, whereas smallcableprovider.com will say greater than 10, I'm going to fail this and count it as an SPF fail. So different implementations across different platforms will happen. Certainly, I think utilizing subdomains appropriately for different mail streams is the recommendation that I would go with, and I think it sounds sort of consistent across the board from the rest of the panel here. So when it comes to mistakes that you see commonly beyond SPF lookup, what are you seeing? We'll go in reverse order this time. So Zakir, what are the common mistakes you're seeing when it comes to authentication with the brands you work with?
So the biggest problem that I see with the brands that I work with is primarily the SPF thing, primarily, and then after that, obviously, I have to make sure whether the brands should get the DKIM signed. That so regarding authentication perspective, or from that point of view, I would say the SPF is the biggest hurdle, because if a company size is of 1,000 plus and with various departments, I see it's a big hurdle and it's a big block to get everybody aligned and come to a point where like everybody's sharing information with each other, and especially with the guys like us who are maintaining the deliverability. And suddenly one team starts using some third-party service, using the primary root domain, and then the chaos happens, and then the shit goes for toss. So it happens to be like more of a damage control kind of thing. So this is a primary hurdle of I have seen like people or the companies are not adopting that fast, even after explaining them, because they find it a little bit problematic because there are so many teams out there. So I would say that's the communication, or maybe the awareness is the single core problem that I can see. The rest apart from the technology or the implementation thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
Lauren?
and Zakir kind of just stole mine, because I think that was the challenge that I've seen. You're working for a couple of different ESPs and now kind of being, sort of in like the deliverability monitoring space, from more focusing on like helping people get to setting up their DMARC and things like that. The biggest challenge that I see is literally just getting people to publish the records in a timely manner and getting them published correctly. Like even sometimes there's an IT manager who he just doesn't want to set it up for whatever reason, and you have to kind of get to like, why are you so resistant to this, and what's the problem, and then kind of just getting them to set that up correctly. Like if there's any kind of data errors in there where you just going to have something mistyped, or you're missing some little bit of that record, that's going to be a problem. And then you've got to go back through all of that red tape in that huge corporate environment to get them to add the tilde, or to do whatever it is that they forgot. So I think that's the biggest challenge. It's just getting people on board and just getting it done correctly.
Yep, I can bounce off of Zakir and Lauren as well to say that pretend you're building a Lego house or a gingerbread house. Set up things properly from the start before you flip the switch. Just keep it simple instead of rushing to turn things on and then go, oh, we need to do A because I need to talk to Mr. A, Mrs. B. Try to set things up as early as you can and understand what you're authenticating and why, instead of just wanting to authenticate for the sake of authentication. So and a good example I could use is a past job or even my current job, where just explaining to different business units on the purpose for authenticating before you flip the switch, not just rushing to, we have this thing we need to do. Take that extra 1-2 minutes, 1 week, and just break it down. Try to keep it simple. So to Lauren's point, some IT folks or even the next team's neighboring team's manager could just be difficult because he doesn't understand why you need to authenticate. So it could save headache further on.
Yeah, I think one of the other ones I would add that none of you actually touched on is the propensity for typos, or the examples, right? Like I can tell you that I've sent before instructions to a client that say things like include your domain. And so they actually just then copy and paste where it says include your domain versus the actual domain. Like intended of insert, like replace this and insert your domain here instead. So I think, everyone's moving quickly. People are trying to get things done. But I agree. You have to sort of take that break, take a step back, look at what's being asked. Think about, like, when they say your domain, do they actually mean like domain.com instead of your domain? Kind of thing. So it's much more complicated, I think, than people give it credit for.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because we all touched upon this, right? We all touched upon kind of how like the lack of understanding of either why it's important or how to do it is such a big barrier. And it's so interesting. I almost imagine it like playing a game of operator or like telephone, where you're like, okay, so I'm going to tell Udemy how to do it, and then Udemy's going to tell Matthew, and then Matthew's going to tell Zakir, and by the time it gets to Zakir, who's actually has to do the change, there's been so many like kind of just morphs of what the actual need is that. Again, then you're like, well, wait, what am I doing? And then, of course, Zakir, as the gatekeeper, is going to be like, I'm not doing that. That doesn't make sense. And then we have to go back through the whole chain and try to figure out what we're doing here. So yeah, just a lot of time, lots of headaches.
So I just want to add one more point with respect to the typos that Matthew had raised. So how I solved it is like, coming with, obviously I face this obstacle a lot of time. So what I do is like, I normally just see what is the existing SPF record, what I want to get changed. I don't ask them anything. I just say, just copy paste it. I do everything. That is in the mail. Just do this, replace it, and done, submit, done. And that the job is done. So I make sure they don't have to think. They don't have to actually take any effort from their side. So it's like spoon feeding, or maybe right away, give them what actually has to be done, so that we accomplish the goal that I want to achieve.
Yeah, there's a great comment in the chat here that says, depending on what your ticketing system is too, be aware of copy and paste can actually insert characters or change characters. You might get an M- instead of a hyphen or things like that, depending on the platform, which I've also seen dozens of times when you copy text out of a Word document and put it in an email. All of a sudden, why doesn't it encode properly? Because you've changed the text. You've changed the actual characters that are being copied. So that's probably the number one source I would say that breaks the recommendation from Zakir of just copy and paste this. Well, that's great, as long as it didn't go through 6 other platforms to get to the person that needs to copy and paste it.
So there is a hack for it. Like, use a normal Sublime text or simple text file, not the Word document and all. So use, keep things simple. Just use it, attach it, and then ask them to go for it.
Yeah. Make it foolproof. From a lot of things that we talk about when it comes to deliverability, are focused on setting up your network right, setting up your domains right. What else are you seeing from a deliverability point of view, that causes problems? Each of you give me your number one problem, and then we'll go back to authentication. I always like to just ask this question because it's a little different. My next group's going to be on BIMI, so I want you guys to all be aware of that. So I'll give you a few seconds to think about that, but tell me what your number one deliverability challenge is first.
Ladies first this time. Let's mix it up.
Okay. Thanks, Udemy. Yeah, I'll say data quality. And I don't just mean is the address valid or invalid. I really mean pulling in email addresses that actually genuinely want to correspond with you via email and like get value out of what you're sending. It's almost like you build your list through a sweepstakes or you purchase a list or do something that's a little bit like to grow your list really quickly. But and of course I sit in the quality over quantity camp because I'm a deliverability person and I'm very cautious and careful there. But I really think it's one of those, like, you really need to think about your goals with email and then build your program accordingly. Because otherwise it's like you end up with this list of people that just don't care about the content that you're sending. And then you wonder why you're having deliverability issues, right? So just align the goals, build your list accordingly, and then just take care of that list. Treat it like your little baby.
So I could bounce on what Lauren said and not say the same thing. So I could piggyback to the example of take that extra 1-2 days to touch all the fingers on the hand to make sure they're all 10 fingers, just an analogy before you start moving. And one would be PTR records. And you'd be surprised how some people still forget to do that, where I saw on a mailing list one time where the guy said, I don't need to set up PTR records. I already have SPF and DKIM. I said, well, okay. Then part of the identity picture is not there. So yeah, that's one that I would put on, just because Lauren talked about quality. We could talk about authentication, but you could authenticate and then have dead PTR records. I don't know who it goes to, where it's from. There's no photo in reverse DNS. So yeah.
All right. Zakir, do you have one for us?
Yeah, so I would like bifurcate this point into two things. Like, one would be the ESP perspective and another would be the brand's perspective. So from the ESP perspective, from the deliverability point of view, the biggest hurdle being the infrastructure. Coming back to whether it is a reverse DNS on setting up, you're having all your SPF records and all that setup. But from the brand's perspective, the biggest hurdle for deliverability is that they want to send this million mail yesterday. So everybody kind of don't want to follow the warm-up process. So even after doing all the 10 checkpoints, then it's very difficult to make them understand to reach to 1 million mails per month or 1 million mails per week, whatever the amount is. It requires a proper warm-up. And I have felt like that's something like, kind of makes trouble too when you expediently or rapidly warms up and the deliverability goes for a toss.
Great. Those are all great examples of sort of things that need to be in there beyond authentication, right? Authentication is a part of the puzzle. Getting your other technical setup, getting your list targeting right, getting your strategy right. Like, inbox is not a strategy, right? It's a result. The strategy is what you do to get to the inbox. So, Demi, I'm going to throw this one to you simply because it's a follow-up to your PTR. Raymond asked in the comments here in this, PTR is great, but what about PTRs for IPv6? Or what type of advice would you give for IPv6? And I'm asking you specifically because I know you guys send mail over IPv6.
I knew you were going to do that. Thank you, Raymond, and sure. So IPv6 is another form of internet protocol addresses that it's been around for a couple of years, but I could be wrong, but I've not seen it as much as it is at maybe LinkedIn or Comcast or Google, which have a good amount of IPv6 traffic flowing back and forth. Understand what it's about before you think about implementing it. So that's a simple way I could put it, partially because of stuff I can't talk about at LinkedIn, but if you don't understand it, just don't be in a hurry to do it. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Now that makes sense. And I think, if you are going to even consider looking at IPv6 mailings, make sure your authentication works, because you're probably not going to get delivered if you're not authenticating properly. So certainly something to pay extra attention to. And I agree, like you said, think about it, think twice about it, think a third time about it before you do it, at least for now.
I'm not avoiding the question, but it's just the stuff I can't mention. That's why. So, but that's
fine. I'm not asking for the secret sauce. I'm not asking for the secret sauce. It's all good.
There's no spaghetti meatballs.
So I talked a bit about BIMI in my session, and I know that I at least know that Lauren and Udemy have some experience with BIMI. Zakir, I actually don't know if you have any experience with BIMI, but if you do, please do weigh in, because I think I have a personal interest in making it work, being part of the working group, obviously. But what are you seeing from your clients requesting it, and that could be an internal client versus an external client, and some of the challenges that they're facing? Maybe Lauren, we'll go first with you. Demi, you'll go last, simply because I know that you guys are heavily involved, and then we'll go with Zakir next.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I think it's a really exciting time. I think BIMI is. I think Matt, I mentioned this to you before, but I feel like BIMI is sort of like the carrot that you can dangle in front of marketers to get them to authenticate, right? Because the prerequisites for BIMI are to have SPF and DKIM set up, as well as DMARC, and so you've got to have all of this kind of stuff in place. And so really, it is just kind of like that ultimate goal to get you to go through all of these steps that are technical and painful and a little bit annoying to deal with. And I think one of the challenges that I think we talked about when you came on our Deliverability Unfiltered episode for Kickbox was the fact that people are trying to test this within their own personal inboxes. So they're sending one-to-one messages, but BIMI only works for transactional messages or bulk messages, like commercial messages that are being sent. So if you're like, oh gosh, I can't get it to work, I don't understand why it's not working, try to send it, just send a production mail and look for it there instead of looking in your own test account. I think that's one fact. And then there's also just the idea that you need to have a good sender reputation in addition to just publishing that authentication record, right? So unlike all the others where you push it live and then it sits there and it's on the internet and it works, assuming it's set up correctly, here you also need to have that good sender reputation. So it's kind of one of those, like, you're like, well, I think I set it up correctly. Troubleshooting it, I think, is a little bit more perhaps ambiguous than it is with some of the other records. So.
Sure. Zakir, do you have any comments or thoughts on BIMI?
No, I have not worked much on BIMI extensively because I'm primarily struggling with DMARC implementation only.
Okay.
So making people understand DMARC, get alignments, and all that stuff. So that's been the primary thing. BIMI comes secondary. So yeah, that's I haven't worked much.
Okay, well, fair enough. That BIMI requires DMARC at enforcement. Maybe you can talk about a little bit of the challenging of getting DMARC to enforcement then, as it's a prerequisite. What challenges do your clients face getting to enforcement?
Yeah, so the biggest challenge being so getting it partially aligned for DMARC is a bit easier. But once we talk about getting it to properly fully aligned, making sure all the from and written part and the DCAM, the message is getting signed with the proper brand's name. That is the biggest hurdle because in the big companies it kind of varies from multiple departments, and that's the biggest challenge to make. So getting them on DMARC for monitoring is very easy, but the real journey and the battle starts after that to make sure to make them to reach to the proper fully alignment thing. So partially alignment is like maximum times we settle down in somewhere. Okay, fine. Let's for a few months we'll settle down for partial alignment, and but yeah, that's the biggest hurdle. Like to actually bring everyone on the same page and get fully aligned.
Okay. And Udemy, I know that in a past life you worked with a brand to get BIMI set up because you and I worked on that together a little bit. And then in your current life, I know that you are using BIMI as an organization. So do you want to talk a little bit about your experiences and maybe like some of those challenges that we just talked about? Like how do you get from unaligned mail to aligned mail?
Sure. So in my past life, one of my 9 lives, like the cat in Lauren's background. So some of the challenges I experienced were bringing people into a room to explain, one, the benefits of BIMI. So luckily at the time, the domain in question was at a reject policy. So that made things a little easy. The work was done before I came into the life. And then the interesting part was having the SVG logo you mentioned in your previous session correctly. Hosting it, where do you want to host, internal, external, picking the right logo because most brands have multiple logos or a good number do. So I was like, that may not look good in Yahoo Mail client or Google whenever they would pilot, because at the time Google did not announce a BIMI pilot. So little things like that, and that took, I think it was 3 to 4 month project just to get that BIMI record and BIMI live at my last live. Currently, one of my colleagues handles most of that. So it's been pretty smooth at LinkedIn, but also the one key thing I remember at a previous conference I spoke about Bimmy was understanding that it's not just a benefit for email, it's a benefit for messaging. It could be email, it could be mobile client, it could be any type of messaging tied to that brand marketer. So it is a little carrot that you dangle from the marketers, like Lauren said, definitely. But to get to Bimmy, you need to have some sort of DMARC policy in place for that to work. So, yeah, hope that helped.
No, it's great. So I think as a as service providers, clients ask all the time for help with these types of things, but it's obviously something that is a much bigger effort than just the marketing team. Yeah. So how do you, as a service provider, and Udemy, you're as a past service provider even, how do you internally work? How do you make that education go beyond just the marketing team, right? Because obviously you need IT involved, you may need corporate security involved, in some cases you may need legal involved, because in order to get a certificate, you need to get corporate branding and you need to have a registered mark. So there are certainly things that need to get done there. What are some tips that you would tell people that are internally looking to say, I want to do this before they start? So maybe, Zakir, in the DMARC world, how do you get those teams aligned? And then we'll move on to sort of the Bimmy side with Udemy and Lauren.
Yeah, so with respect to DMARC, the primary objective is to bring the security team on the same page, right from the top of the chain, so that they understand the benefit of adding this particular record and thereby ensuring that nothing wrong is happening because of adding this particular record for the root domain. So that's the thing, other than, so marketing team, they're least bothered. What they're really bothered about is deliverability, and the objective is opens, clicks, and all that. So that the narration and the story is very different when talking to marketing guys. But when talking to the IT guys, it's the implementation part. And before the implementation part, the security goes, they have to actually clear whatever we want to approach. So this happens only for the BFSI brand, I would say, not for other companies. That's it. From
okay, and Lauren,
I agree with what Zakir was saying. I think it really is just kind of about getting everybody on the same page. It's one of those, at least in organizations that I've worked in, the IT team and the marketing team tend to have to work together a lot, but they also butt heads because they have completely different objectives, business objectives. And so I think it's just a matter of having that initial kind of meeting, maybe with a couple of key stakeholders to kind of say, hey guys, can we get on the same page here? This is why I want this. And then give them a chance to kind of raise their objections, their concerns, and then kind of get all on the same page to say, okay, I get it. We can tackle that concern by doing X, Y, Z, or we can kind of factor this in, or we can go this route to kind of do it. So I think it's just about kind of making everybody feel comfortable enough and invested enough in the project to see the benefit and then see why that deserves priority over something else. So I think that's oftentimes where you're just like, wait, why are we doing this? And then you just get pushback, and there's a lot of wasted time in between if you just don't get it kind of going from the get-go. So find your internal cheerleaders and then really push for them to get you through the project.
Okay. And then Udemy, any thoughts on that?
Yes, I could piggy off what both Zakir and Lauren said. From the onset, I think what I did was, or what folks could do for both, is have everybody feel like a cheerleader in the process, be it marketing, IT, security, and legal, and the company's executive management. So from the security part, for them, I said this DMARC is a proactive way to prevent whatever if you don't have DMARC, and then you add Bimmy on top as an icing, of which, and then I say, hey, marketing guys, so marketing cheerleader, the icing with Bimmy is, you want to see more revenue, but this is not money focused. Every cheerleader has a part to play in the Bimmy ecosystem. And then I think that's what kind of everybody was like, oh, I get to have a little piece of the pie here. And then versus Udemy wants to win and turn on Bimmy. That's kind of how I took it. So it sounds funny, but if you think about it, each team will feel like they're part of the pie. By the end of the day, it's the brand or company's win to turn on Bimmy. So, yeah.
That's a great way to sell it, and I think a great lesson, I think, beyond just BIMI, but any type of project. How do you make everyone feel like they're winning as they participate? So we're coming up on the end of time for the session. I want to thank you all, and I'd love to just have a quick final thought on authentication. If there was one thing that you wanted a marketer to go out and do after this, like tomorrow when they wake up and they're like, it's a brand new day and I'm ready to start, I should check on, I should implement, I should have that conversation. What should it be? Udemy, you're on the big screen right now, so I'm going to let you go first, and then we'll ask the final two. We'll go Lauren next, and then Zakir, I know you're up next, so we'll leave you for last so we can disappear and you can start your session.
Sorry, that's like so I had to look at my phone for one reason. So a simple way is Black Friday is over, Cyber Monday is over, the wins and losses are over. We have 3 weeks to next year from today. So use that as a slow start to think about next year of evaluating what worked, what didn't work. If you've got like an authentication checklist, we did this, we've done this. The things that are check positive, did we do it properly? Do we have issues? And then just go through that, and don't be in a rush to turn on authentication in 2 seconds. It's better to take time at tests and go through that list. Everybody's been through that hurdle. Everywhere that sends mail today has been through this. So you're not the last, you're not the first.
Lauren?
Yeah, and I guess, touching on the fact that you said, what can they do to wake up tomorrow and do, and touching on the fact that Udemy said that we are in the middle of a very key season. And so, honestly, at this point, if your authentication is broken, you probably already know it because you've got a lot of builds failing somewhere or something. But I would say, just tomorrow, go in and maybe use the tool that Netcore has created called, greatemails.co. Correct, right? Yeah. That can really help you really quickly. Just pop in your domain that you're sending from and just check out how things are looking, making sure that everything's kind of working the way that it should be. And then once the season ends and you kind of get some energy back in 2021, let's say in January, then yeah, definitely just go check out your email program, review the stats, try to figure out, aside from Black Friday and all of those crazy days, go back to the typical days when you were sending more of the business as usual kind of stuff, figure out what worked, figure out what didn't, and then use that to just continue to kick ass in 2021.
Sure. Zakir, do you have any closing thoughts on authentication in general and things that you would have people look at, immediately or in the very near future?
Yeah, so I would like to add a couple of points, like, stick to basics. I mean, you don't have to be implement 10 things in order to continue or improve your deliverability, or particularly. So stick to the basics, complete with the basic hygiene practices, and that should suffice to actually, score and do your job properly. That's it.
All right, nice and simple. I like it. I like keeping things simple. I think if I had one thing that I would say in closing, in order to set yourself up for 2021, consider, if you're not doing it already, implementing a DMARC none policy. Find a DMARC report vendor, set up a none policy for your domain if you're not doing it now, and spend the next 3 weeks collecting data on your email program so you can see if there are any flaws in your validation and authentication solutions. See if there's any holes or vendors that you're still using that you maybe shouldn't be. Like I wouldn't be surprised if most companies out there are using a vendor somewhere in the back end they didn't know they were using. I've seen that far too many times. I remember talking with Chris Arundale. They turned on DMARC for a client that said, "Oh, we only have 6 vendors," and they found 18. So, certainly, and a lot of those were just legacy things that never got turned off. So I would say if you could set up a none policy for your DMARC tomorrow, it doesn't impact delivery. It doesn't have any sort of downside other than generating feedback and data for your organization to process, to look at and see if you have any holes in your authentication solution. Definitely, I would say I would do that now so that in 2021, you can hit the ground running with a month worth of data to look back and review and process, and then make those plans to maybe fix an overstuffed SPF record that's more than 10 lookups, maybe fix those domain keys that are old, maybe identify those vendors that are no longer supposed to be mailing for your domains, or those vendors that, a random sales guy has gone and set up and is just using his personal credit card to pay for so that he can send cold emails on your behalf or something like that. All of these are actual real situations I've seen, as well as I've seen situations where a competitor is spoofing a domain in order to tank a reputation of one of their competing brands. So all of these things are things that you will find and identify if you start that. And if that's the one thing that I tell you to do between now and next year, just so you can be ready for 2021, that's the takeaway I'd like you to all have. Otherwise, thanks very much for the panel. You guys are fantastic. The comments have been great. Thank you all for participating in the chat. And as usual, if you need to reach any of us, we are all here for the rest of the day, and we're all available through the Hopin platform. So thank you very much, panel.
Thank you so much. Thank you.